Hello, everyone. Thanks for listening in. I'm doing an interview here with Robert Chapin. Am I pronouncing it correctly?
It's Chapin, but
Chapin.
that's close enough.
Okay. Do you go by Bob? You sign the emails like Bob.
Yeah, Bob's fine.
Okay. Okay. I'm here with Bob Chapin, who was
Chapin.
in Sinbad: Battle of the Dark Knights.
Oh, good God, are we talking about that? Oh my God.
um, which, if you guys watch movie nights, you might remember it is one of the most disastrous movies that I've ever reviewed. Just a
Uh,
hilarious experience. He
uh,
played Kether. I'm not even sure on the pronunciation of that name either. AKA Discount Kevin Sorbo from the movie. And he's been nice enough to donate some of his time to do this interview with me. So
oh my God. Yeah, Kether. Apparently, we found out in Jordan. We talked to some of the locals, and they said, "What is your name in this movie?" And I said, "My name is Kether," and they started laughing. And I said, "Why are you laughing?" He's like, "That means dirt."
Oh, that's
So,
amazing.
oh, it is amazing. It is amazing that it ever got made. It is amazing that all kinds of amazing.
That means dirt. I just kept
Yeah.
hearing Kevin when they said it, which I guess went with the discount Kevin Sorbo, because I could.
Oh my God, I love the discount Kevin Sorbo too. It was hilarious because
It
I don't know
just.
if I already wrote you about that, but one of one of the things that always happens in LA is we always have stories of missed opportunities. And right after I did my first film, Ring of Steel, I got a casting call for this Sword and Sandal movie, which was just atrocious. And this was before Sinbad, and but it was just so bad. And I asked my friends; they were like, "Yeah, if it's really terrible, don't go for it." And I thought it was miscast because they wanted a muscle guy, and I was like, "No, that's not me." And they were like, "No, no, no, we just want to run a regular guy." So I finally just passed on it, and it turned out that was indeed Hercules.
What?
Yes,
So you passed up on Hercules' Legendary Journeys.
yeah. So I could have been Kevin
Wow,
Sorbo.
you could have been Kevin Sorbo.
I could have been. Yeah,
Ah.
there's all kinds of stories like that. So anyway, so that's why that was just absolutely hilarious. And your review is just so right on about so many things. I was like, oh my God, was she actually there? Because because you figured out all the details, all the craziness. And like, look, this didn't happen in the same places, and they try to pick up the pieces and I don't know what happened here, but this is what looks like what happened. You are absolutely correct on everything.
Wow,
So
that's great to hear. Well, that was interesting just to do some detective work on that movie because I couldn't find anything about it, and Sinbad's such a generic name, it's hard to look up anything about it.
but
So
what was amazing is that number one, someone actually saw the film, and someone number two, someone actually did the detective work. It's like, why would you do that unless someone was killed along the way? Why would you go through all that trouble? I mean, we really appreciated the folks who worked on the film, myself, Anthony DeLogis, and like the stunt coordinator John Cade. We were all just laughing hysterically at the review because it was just so right on, and it's just the tip of the iceberg about how much actually went down on this film in terms of the craziness and the horror.
yeah, I mean the stories you're telling me, it's so much crazier than I thought. I just figured it was a case of running out of money or some trouble with the lead actors, and it was clear that it could not be finished as intended, but I had no idea it was as crazy as some of the stuff that you're telling me.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, and they did run out of money, but the thing was is they had a month and a half in Jordan. They had plenty of money. Uh, One of the problems they had was a production coordinator who believed who told everybody that he was good friends with King Hussein
Oh, of
and the
course.
Jordanian army. So that's not something you want to just sort of throw around.
Yeah.
Um, I came on board this thing at AFM at the American Film Market. Daniel Bernhardt was originally supposed to be starring in this film,
Oh wow, I love Daniel Bernhardt.
and I was walking around, and this all kind of started with me. I was walking around AFM, and I noticed that there was a poster for Sinbad, but Bernhardt's name had been crossed out, had been blackened out. So I knew something was going on with this film, and they weren't fully cast. So I actually had a headshot with me. I handed them my info, and I said, if you guys are getting ready to do this, if this hasn't been shot yet, give me a call. 2 weeks later, I get a call from the production company that says they're getting ready to shoot this thing. They weren't sure whether they were going to go to Morocco or where. But yeah, they said they needed a stunt coordinator for the film, and that I could, that I could either stunt coordinate or be part of the film or both. So they invited me to come down. I met with this guy Vincent, who was one of the production coordinators, and he wanted to make sure that I knew what I was doing. And typically that means if you're a stunt coordinator or if a fight coordinator or a sword coordinator, that they would take a look at your resume or whatever. But no, this guy took me out back and proceeded to show me some of his death techniques. He wanted to know that I could actually kill someone with a sword.
What?
So this is how this whole journey began.
What?
He ended up showing me some of his death skill techniques, which may or may not have involved killing someone with a straw. And after showing me all of this, he felt fairly convinced that I knew what I was doing, even though I hadn't actually told him anything. He just showed off for about an hour. So I was on board this thing. They needed a bad guy who could do swordplay, so I recommended Anthony DeLongis. I'd known him for like 20 years.
Wow.
So Tony came on board, and I don't know how this happened. But they finally decided they were going to shoot this thing in Jordan. This guy, the production coordinator, just said to everybody that he knew King Hussein and that he could get us the entire Jordanian army, and he made all sorts of promises. And this is where things just started to go wrong, because if someone in a production meeting said, "Well, we need to build the Great Wall of China," he's like, "I could do that." Production designer would say, "No, well, I've got some people who will do it for this amount of money." He's like, no, that's cheating. No. I got people who will do that. We'll get the Jordanian army to do that. So he kept making these assertions that just never came true, to the point where at one point we were supposed to do, there's a scene where Sinbad's out in a cave somewhere and they're sitting around this pool of water. And he couldn't, this was late on the production, and he couldn't get anyone to actually dig this hole. So the entire crew sat around for a day while he personally dug this stupid ass hole. So it was absolutely ridiculous. For most of us, it was just a free vacation, including the director, who just didn't show up half the time. There was a couple days where he's like, "Where is the director?" "Oh, he's out doing some shopping." So he just sort of left us to our own devices.
It was at least fun being in Jordan then.
Well, for the most part, but then again, this guy who is in charge of things falling apart, also had a temper to him. And if you crossed him or questioned him, he would pull a gun on you.
What?
And he would threaten your life. Yeah, this is the way things happen. So we're in a third world country. We've got some guy who's threatening other people on the crew, and all of a sudden, people start disappearing on the cast and crew.
Oh no!
So, and we would call up the States and we'd ask, "Oh, is such and such, did they get on a plane and they're back in the States?" And they said, "No, they never showed up."
What?
So people were disappearing. This guy was a nutcase. And shit just started going down, and we had no idea what was happening.
Did anyone find out what happened to them?
Well, eventually what happened is he pissed off someone in the crew who was actual friends with King Hussein. And we did actually meet Prince Abdullah at some point in time, who is now the king of Jordan.
Wow.
Which he was a wonderful gentleman. Came on to set, but at any rate, one of the people in the crew who was threatened was friends with Prince Abdullah or King Hussein. So this guy Vince was escorted from the country. He was sent on a mission to get something at the airport, and he was never allowed back in. So that's what happened to Vince.
Oh, that's crazy.
We found out that the people who had disappeared were in fear for their lives and were hanging out at the American consulate.
Wow. I don't blame them. That sounds crazy.
Yeah, and it was just a crazy enough place that stuff like that could happen. Yeah, and there's all other stories. Whenever you shoot in a third world country, there's just crazy shit that's going to go down. Some of the stuff that we take for granted. Like we had an extras coordinator, this lady who was a very nice girl, uh, but she was in charge of all the local extras. And we had a scene where we had this big battle scene on the cliff, where all of everybody was supposed to jump out, and there was supposed to be this big battle scene. And she would tell everybody, "Okay, I need you, all to hide behind the rocks," and they would just stand there. And they understood English, but they weren't going to listen to a girl.
What?
Oh yeah. So I would have to get on the megaphone and say, "Hey guys, is it cool? Can you hide behind the rock?" And they would listen to me. That would be fine. So, but that's stuff we kind of take for granted in, where we live. And so it was quite an education for her. And, other things that you just wouldn't have happen in the States. There's a story I tell, the chicken story. I don't know if you want to hear about this one, but
I do want to hear about this one.
It's classic. It's classic Jordan. We had in that scene where there's a battle on the side of the cliff. It's written in the script that this happens. This is supposed to be a comical fight, and that chickens are flying everywhere. Well, the second unit director, a very proper British fellow, took that to heart, and he ordered a bunch of chickens. The next thing I know, there's a PA, and I've coordinated the fights for this thing, so I'm supposed to be in charge of all of this stuff. Mm-hmm. But there's a PA walking up the side of the cliff with 3 chickens, holding on to the legs of 3 chickens, live chickens. And he walks up the side of this cliff, and we're all hiding behind the cliffs. There's about 30, 40 of us getting ready to jump out. And the second unit director, in a very proper English voice, says, "Okay, roll cameras and throw the chickens."
Oh.
So this dude, from the back of a 40-foot cliff, sidearms these chickens over the side of the cliff.
Oh, no.
And of course, chickens don't fly. Except for a split second when I'm sure they thought they could.
This is the best moment of the chicken's life.
So, and they hit the ground like bags of wet cement. And everybody hiding behind the cliff, you just heard everybody go, "Ooh." And you could just hear these chickens just go, "Bark."
Oh.
And it's something that would never happen in the States. You'd have an SPCA on your back immediately.
Yeah.
But of course, takes don't go off with just one take. Scenes don't go off with just one take. So, second, third take, whatever, and this guy keeps hauling these chickens, up the hill. And by the third take, 2 of them are dead. One of them just about gone. Oh. And one of the extras just said, "Listen, can I just kill the chicken? Just put it out of its misery." And the PA actually said, No, I think he's got one left." Yeah.
I just don't understand,
it's a horrible, horrible story, but it's indicative of what goes on, in a third world country where they can barely eat, or, people are on the side of the road just banging rocks together. They could care less about a bunch of chickens, killing a bunch of chickens for live chickens for a show.
Yeah, I just don't understand. After the first take, wouldn't they realize it doesn't? The chickens aren't flying, right?
The take that they used, if you take a look, and I'm surprised you didn't notice this, all of a sudden, if you look back on this film, all of a sudden in that scene, there's a couple dead chickens that get flung over the side of a cliff. Trailing a bunch of feathers.
Wow.
And it was so surreal that from then on, anything that happened on the show, we would just go, "Oh, the camera just fell over."
I'll have to look for that again, because I don't remember a scene with chickens at all.
No, because because they're dead, and they're just, for no reason, a couple dead chickens, if you look closely, just come flying over the side of a cliff. But yeah, I can understand why that would, escape you, because there's just so much else wrong with the film. This is something that, is just minor on the film but this is the kind of crap that was happening, to us.
I mean, when a movie is so obviously patched together, when it is so obvious what went wrong with it, just as a viewer with no prior history of it, I mean, that a lot of things had to have gone wrong, and that's crazy.
At some point, we were in Amman, Jordan, in a beautiful hotel. It started out very beautiful and just spacious. They had tons of money to spend, and slowly but surely. And then we went to Petra and we shot in the Stone City, which was amazing. Here I am on horseback, and and people aren't allowed, tourists aren't allowed on horseback, through this passageway where they shot Indiana Jones in the Temple of Doom, or in the Last Crusade rather.
It's a beautiful location.
And so there's all sorts of coolness associated with it. But as they start running out of money, and as this one goober, is just keeps spending money, not trusting anyone, the finances, the budget gets tighter and tighter, and at some point in time, we actually have to sneak out of hotels. I believe we've spoiled filmmaking for generations to come. It was quite ridiculous. Shooting at Petra was beautiful, but you said you're a fan of Dean Stockwell.
Oh yeah.
Well, poor Dean. He got out there and he was just like, he knew. He and Mickey Rooney. Mickey Rooney said to me, "Is like, this is never gonna make it to the theaters. I know."
So it was intended to be theatrical.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
I mean, it was a huge budget. I don't know what it was, like $20-50 million. For a film of this, it had to be more than that actually. They had big aspirations for this, but Dean Stockwell knew ahead of time, and he got flown in to Petra. So he basically got flown into Amman, driven out to Petra to shoot his scenes, but they couldn't afford to build a Bedouin village, and it's probably because of this guy Vince, in the location. So his Bedouin village was built at a local high school gym, inside a gym.
What?
So he flew out to location in Petra to shoot inside a gym, and so he never actually got this. It was absolutely ridiculous. But he knew ahead of time that this, something was amiss, and he said, "Listen, if you're going to have me come out, you're going to need to treat me a little extra special." And he apparently, part of his contract was to get some of these Cuban cigars, his favorites.
That doesn't surprise me. That seems exactly like Dean Stockwell.
And he said, "These better be waiting for me when I get off the plane." And he got off the plane. There were no cigars. He turned around and got back on the plane. And he was ready to leave when they said, no, we'll get you your cigars.
What?
Oh, God, yes.
Oh, my gosh. That's some balls, though. But, I mean, if you have...
Speaking of balls, I got a great story from Mickey Rooney.
Okay. Oh, please do tell.
And Mickey, who is a living legend, he's been in movies since the dawn of time. He's like 1 million years old. Yeah. And I'm actually in a room with him, his first day on set. And I think, it's like, what do I say to this guy? He's a living legend. And I said, "Mickey, you're getting along really good. We're doing these shoots in castles, and there's big stone steps, and he's getting around pretty good." And he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm doing much better since my operation." And I was like, "Your operation?" "Oh yeah, you should have seen it. My balls were the size of grapefruits. Here, let me show you." Whoa. And he proceeds to unzip his pants in front of me, and I'm like, whoa. He's like, no, it's okay. Pretend you're a doctor. I'm like, Mickey. I don't know how many of your wives that line worked on, but this is not flying here. And his son came in, who is actually an aspiring stuntman, came into the room. He's like, "Dad, are you trying to show people your balls again? Just stop."
So Mickey Rooney's going around showing people balls. How long had you known him at this point before he's showing...
Oh, that was my first meeting.
That was your first meeting with him. He's showing you his balls.
Oh, yeah.
What a great first meeting.
and then you have people like Rubenstein, little lady from Poltergeist.
Yeah.
Who is just as bizarre in real life. She is that character. I thought, it's like, what an amazing character of Poltergeist. It's like, no, that's her. That is absolutely her.
Wow.
Go into the light, honey. Go into the light. It's just so bizarre, so surreal. And then, of course, I worked with Dante Bosco on Hook. And he was in the prime of his, I'm just going to go out and party. And I think I told you the story of him disappearing for a couple days in Amsterdam.
Yeah.
And, yeah, he just, I don't know actually now whether it's, I was looking over, I actually wrote down a journal of all of this because I knew I wasn't going to believe this after the fact. And like I said, we're actually, now that you've resurrected this monster, we're gonna have to get together, those of us who are still together, and have a screening of this thing. And I've got a lot of the behind the scenes footage as well of like there's stuff of us getting lost, an entire caravan of like 100 cars, and our director didn't know where the location was, so we're driving around in circles all day long through Amman, Jordan. Yeah, just crazy stuff like that.
I'd love to see that footage. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, I just never had it transferred to video, but yeah, I'll have to bust it out.
Definitely. I want to take things back a little bit to this Dante Bosco story, because you told me this, and it's an amazing story, but the people listening have not heard this, so would you recount what that was?
Something, my recollection of this was that we had come into the airport in Amsterdam, and we were on the tarmac for hours, and he finally just, we're on the plane back home, and he finally just said, "Screw this, I'm out of here," and disappeared, didn't get back onto the plane.
That's so amazing. And you said he said he didn't recollect what happened when he was in Amsterdam.
And this is what I remember. I was looking in the journal, and it comes out a little differently, so don't quote me on this, but this is the memory I have of it. And I'm sure, it's been a while since we shot this. This was back in '95, so it was like 20 years ago. But that was the memory I had of it. It did, he apparently wasn't in Amsterdam for an extended period of time, which he doesn't remember. So that much is true. So, I mean, there were people who were just not taking it seriously at all, and he was one of them. He was just, yeah, whatever. He was one of the few. So when they asked people to come back and finish the film, we were like, fuck that. I'm sorry. I can have to believe that, but it was just
No, you can say whatever you want, honestly.
Because they had asked us to come back for half of what we were originally contracted for. So the people who were ready to go back were the people who were like, oh, I haven't seen Bulgaria. Yeah, let's go ahead and check it out.
And it was only Dante Bosco and Anthony DeLongis that said yes, yeah?
That is correct. And I think they were just like, yeah, let's go check out Bulgaria. In the meantime, I was like, no, I've heard enough about Bulgaria. And if Jordan was scary, because there were things that happened. Like if you're just shooting a movie, that's one thing. If you're doing fights, at some point in time, we were doing sword fights on the edge of these 100-foot cliffs, and you're in a third world country. If something goes wrong, and the locals said, just don't get hurt. Whatever happens, don't get hurt. So at some point in time, we insisted that we have, because there was no medical on set, and the closest hospital was hours away. So we insisted that we have an ambulance on set, or some sort of medical facilities.
Yeah.
And we said, listen, we're just not going to show up if there is no medical on set. So we had a little strike, and they conceded, and they brought, the next day there was an ambulance on set. We're like, okay, that's cool. So we're doing these fights in Jordan, in Petra for about a week, and this was in Petra, and at some point in time, because tourists are coming through there all day long to see the Stone City, it's and usually tourists wait till like the end of it's on their bucket list. So, here's a note for anyone who wants to save that kind of stuff for their bucket list. It's in the middle of a freaking desert. There's no water. It's really hard. And at some point in time, we had a German tourist just up and die. And his family was there.
Just because of the conditions?
Oh, yeah. And the family was there. They were pretty sure he wasn't going to make it. So they were just like, they were pretty casual about it. Just like, Uncle Jessup just died,
What?
Is there, and you guys have an ambulance, is it possible you could transport it? Because they had no way to get him back. He's just dead there. And they're not about to carry him. So they're like, okay, can we put him in your ambulance? So I was like, okay, they conceded to that. We opened up the ambulance and found out that it was an empty shell. There was nothing in there except for a roll of toilet paper. There was no gurney. There was no nothing.
What? So
they threw this German tourist in the back of the car without a stretcher or anything. Just threw the body back there.
What?
And for the ambulance to get out of this, because we were in this kind of cul-de-sac cavern sort of thing, and there was a road up the side of the cliff, that was really hard. You needed a 4-wheel drive to get out of it, and the ambulance couldn't get up this bumpy road, so it was bouncing all over the place, and I'm sure the body was just rolling around in the back. So it was bouncing all over the place, and it finally had to go back down the hill and get a running start to make it to the top of this 100-foot hill. And it was absolutely insane.
That is insane. Like the more that I hear about this movie, the deeper the rabbit hole goes.
Oh God, yeah.
Because you mentioned that a tourist had died, but the fact there's all that attached to it, just wow.
Well, it was so surreal that we had as we're driving to set, there was a horse that was dead on the side of the road.
It just died in the desert?
Oh yeah, just laying there, and there's like no one comes, it's not like there's some horse police who's going to come along and clean it up. They just leave stuff there. But we, at this point, it was just so surreal. We had a scene where there's some riders riding along, and they're supposed to be scared by a dragon and ride off the side of a cliff. And we had ordered a bunch of rubber horses to actually throw off the side of a cliff, which is the only way we could do it. This is pre-CGI days, so that's the best way we could think of doing this. And so they promised us the horses. They didn't show. And we were like, can we get at least one? And then, of course, one day we're driving by and there's a dead horse on the side of the road. And we're like, I
guess it's dead anyway.
I wonder if we could throw that on the back of a pickup truck and just like back it up really quick to the side of the hill and just like let it slide off. And then, of course, we were like, and if we need a rider, we had the German tourist. And he was dead already. So
what?
I mean, these are the thoughts. We didn't know. We didn't do this.
Oh, okay.
These are the thoughts that we had. That's how surreal it was, and that's how twisted it was, because we were actually considering shit like that.
Well, I noticed the scene with the dragon was not in this. I noticed
but there are some horses that ride around. Once again, I have to do another screening for myself. But there are some horses that ride around. There's the King's Guard or something like Mephisto's Men. That was another thing, is that Mephisto, Mickey Rooney could never pronounce Mephisto. He kept going like Bafo or Beefeater or Ballistra. He had. Which
well,
I
it was
thought
it was sort of inconsistent in the movie anyway. It was Mephisto, Mephisto. I don't know.
I thought he was hilarious. I thought that was hilarious, and they should have just kept that. Just like that. This old crazy wizard couldn't even get the guy's name straight, which would have been funny. And I had a scene with Mickey Rooney, talk about not being consistent, and he was all over the place. He would always change blocking, or he'd change dialogue, so I was just like, I have no idea what to do right now. But finally, when I did have a conversation where he says that he does that on purpose, and he does it to keep other actors on their toes. I don't know if this is true or not, but it would be brilliant, because, you get actors who are kind of going by the book, and, there's nothing like changing things up to keep people on their toes. But it was very distracting.
He was probably the most over the top in the movie, as far as big boisterous character. I really liked there was a scene that you did with him where they reveal this power that he has, and his fingers turn into snakes.
Yes.
His fingers turn into snakes. Really terrible early CGI snakes, and you just say, "Don't do that."
Yeah, I just don't do that.
That was in the script like that? Don't do that?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, no, this. I would have loved to have changed stuff up, but they were just like, "Nope, it's in the script. Say this," and I'm like, "Okay, really? How many times do I have to say his name?" Every single, I am the keeper of the sacred word, Sinbad. Because it's like, look out, Sinbad. Here we go, Sinbad. Just in case people forgot who he was.
Well, they might. He was such a small part of the movie, considering he was the namesake,
Yeah, exactly. And of course, and I love the fact that, all of a sudden I have this stupid ass death scene, and I'm like, kill him for me, and I've got those two making out over top of me, which is absolutely ridiculous. I wish they had the outtake. Because I actually said there's hey, I'm down here, guys.
Well, that's all I could think about during that scene. They're right on top of you as you're dying.
Exactly. And that's all I could think about. It's just and the fact that you got that you actually, that you actually worded what I was so desperately trying to say in that scene. It's like, oh, you guys down. Because that's exactly what this movie needed, was not to take itself any more seriously.
Yeah.
One of the other stories I was going to share is that Mickey Rooney's son was on this, and he was an aspiring stuntman.
Was he?
And
Did he play a character in it, or he did stunts, or
he was
what?
one of the guards.
Okay.
He was just one of the guards, and he wanted to be a stuntman. So we're like, okay, fine, we'll put him on a horse, and we had this one scene, and the horses were insane. We were promised the Queen's Guard, the horses, and these were all Arabians, and they were all like ex-military. I don't know, they were all shell shocked or something, because they would not stand still for a second. And I ride horses, but these were nutso horses.
Wow.
And so we had a scene where there were 6 riders riding around this cliff, and they ride behind this hill and then over the hill. It's a very impressive scene. But we have 6 riders, and and Mickey Rooney's son was one of them, ride around the back of this hill to go behind this hill, and 6 horses come up over the hill, but there are only 5 riders. So he got ditched at least a dozen times on that scene. And I don't know if they kept the scene where just like, all the horses. But if you see one guy completely out of control, this was Mickey's kid. And he was in his late 20s, early 30s at the time, but he just really wanted to be a stuntman. So,
did he ever achieve his dream, or he just sort of gave up on that?
Well, he did, he did do a couple amazing horse falls. They were unintentional, but this was how bizarre the show was. It was just like, sure, whatever. You want to be a stuntman? Oh, fine.
All right. Well, we have an ambulance waiting in case something happens.
Exactly. Yeah, everybody just, in the English crew, which was very professional, actually. The second unit director was this man who had done, and our DP was a all English crew, which had done Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves.
Okay.
So they knew how to make a movie, not necessarily a good movie, but they knew how to make a movie, at least shoot one. So they were all like, yeah, this is never going to happen. We're in this for a vacation.
It's so funny that you mentioned that there was a budget for this, because outside of some really beautiful locations in Jordan, you don't see the budget on the screen at all.
Of course not. No.
I mean, this is even, not even the post-production stuff. I'm talking about, like, just costuming and wigs. Like, Dean Stockwell's wig is so janky in it. I mean, like, it looks so cheap. Like, the fake beards are so fake, bad looking.
Yeah.
It's just...
And what was hilarious is that, you said it is like, the discounts Kevin Sorbo in his crazy wig. Actually, that was my hair at the time.
I'm sorry. I thought it was a wig.
Because one of my specialties is swordplay, and people can't use their imagination when I go into castings. So I just had it long hair because all the stuff I was doing was period. So, they were like, oh, he makes for a good musketeer. Oh, he makes for a good knight. Oh, he makes for a good pirate. It's just like, so I just kept the long hair. So that's why it looks Yankee, because it's all kind of straight. It is. I was actually dubbed in one review, because I did a couple movies before this, called Dragon Fury, which is another classically bad film.
I'll check it out.
But yeah, I'm called the golden mullet of the future in this thing. So
amazing.
I had to deal with all of that, and the mullet went away years ago when I actually doubled a guy on Mad Men for one of their season finale fight scenes.
Oh, very
and
cool.
they were like, well, you're gonna have to cut it short, and I was like, it's okay, it's about time. They were like, no, you're gonna have to cut it really short. Like, okay, let's do it.
About time to retire it.
Yeah. So, but they're coming back, man. The mullets are coming back. I'm telling you, any day now.
It's the newest thing. There's this whole retro thing going on now with the 80s.
You never know. I mean, it's just, you see the styles that come back, and you're like, really? That came back? All right, go figure.
So was that why you were sort of Sinbad's second-hand man, because you were...
I have no idea. I have no idea who came up with the script. It's just the script is absolutely atrocious. It really is. The whole...
I mean, were you supposed to be part of this Chinese army, or what was the deal?
I have no idea. We were actually supposed to shoot in the Red Sea, and we actually, there was trips to, it was either the Red Sea or the Dead Sea. I think it was the Dead Sea, and there was actually production meetings where they're like, I don't know if we could build a boat that would float in the Dead Sea, because it's all over salinated, and it might just tip over. They weren't sure. They were going to go scout out the location. They were like, well, I don't, there were some guys who didn't want to go because there were apparently landmines still
Wow.
on the locations.
Ah.
This whole thing was originally supposed to shoot in Morocco, and they canceled that when Morocco said, well, you're going to have to give us an extra 10% or 20% of the budget to make sure you get out alive.
What?
And apparently this is something they do. They blackmail the production companies. And, it's just they strong arm into saying, it's like, well, there's all sorts of things that can happen in Morocco. So
scary.
So this is why they didn't go to Morocco. Our crew in Jordan was kind of scary because it was an all Israeli crew. And I don't know how this worked out, but it was an Israeli crew in military. They were all in military fatigues and transport. So we had like a dozen of these military transport vehicles with Israeli military dressed in camo that were driving us everywhere and doing all our crew stuff. So we looked like a small battalion.
Wow.
So yeah, and when tensions are high and Jordan is set smack dab in the middle of the Mideast conflict, they're supposed to be like Sweden and Switzerland, whatever. They just don't want to get involved, and they're happy people. But here we are driving around in this military, and we have B-1 bombers flying overhead, and everyone has an M16. We had some guards on the show who would joke around with us and point an M16 at you and go bang bang, ha ha ha.
What?
No,
don't joke about that.
Oh yeah. One of the guards in particular took a liking to me, and and one of the things I wasn't prepared for is that you'll just be walking along and they'll just sort of hold hands. Guys hold hands there. It's a thing they do.
Okay.
And he would look into my eyes and say, "I love you, Jubna." And I was like, "Yeah, I love you too. I love you too." He's like, "No, you don't understand. I really love you." I'm like, "Oh, okay, all right, good." And he kept calling me Jubna. I don't know what Jubna meant.
Oh, maybe it's an affectionate term. I don't know.
I asked someone what Jubna meant, and he said milk toast.
Of course.
Because I was kind of a stranger in this strange land. Everybody is all of 5'8" and dark skinned, and here I am, 6'5", blonde hair. And this was right about the time the movie Tarzan or some TV show Tarzan came out. And we went to a local high school because we needed stunt pads, and they didn't have them there. There was no stunt gear rental. So we had the bright idea to go to a local high school and rent stunt gear, and we went to this place, and the pads were rock hard. But basically I walked into campus, and it was between classes, and everyone stopped. Like 1,000 kids in the halls, and they all looked at me at the same time and went, "Tarzan! It's Tarzan!" So it was just absolutely surreal. We got to the principal's office, and we asked him about, borrowing some pads. And he had a student working for him in the office, and he said, well, he asked the student to help us out, and for a treat, he gave the student a cigarette.
Oh. Of course.
Yeah, it's like, here's a cigarette. Go help these guys out. And everybody smokes, no matter what age you are. That's what they did.
Wow.
Absolutely surreal experience.
So would you say this was the strangest filming experience you had? This movie?
Oh no. It was one of the strangest. I've been to India. I've done a lot of other shows. I had one show where the entire cast and crew was held hostage with a shotgun.
Oh my God.
So I mean, this stuff happens all the time, and it doesn't matter if it's a big budget, small budget, whatever. Crazy shit happens. This is why the whole movie industry, I believe, is so unstable. It's like you can have 1,000 or several thousand people working on a movie, and one day Tom Cruise steps off a curb and twists his ankle, and the entire movie is on hiatus for a couple months while he recoups. So it's just insane in that respect. You have to be willing to just like, okay, yeah, all right, well, what do we do now, sort of thing. It's constant chaos for every show I've ever been on.
Well, I mean, you got to constantly be on your toes. I mean, no production I've ever been part of has gone completely smoothly, but it's never gone anything like any of the stories you've told here. So.
Yeah, well, Tony will tell you the rest of the stories because he went to, and I don't know if you have his number, but he went to Bulgaria to finish this up, and they hired on this director to rewrite and finish the show. This guy Elvestino, whatever.
Elvis Restaino, I think. He played Murky Khan.
Whatever.
Murky Khan, of course.
Murky Khan. And, I feel like I dodged a bullet on that one. I mean, sometimes you do movies just for the stories. And I'm sure I already had my share of stories on this one. I really, and this is 20 years later. And I'm amazed that I remember as much as I do. But it's just because it's so, some of the stuff is just so surreal and burned into my brain.
It'd be hard to forget.
I'm sure when I look into my journal and we look over the video, it's going to be, oh my God, that happened too. Oh. So these are just some of the highlights. There was, we could get together, and we probably will when we get together, and just tell stories all day because it was that insane, the amount of craziness that went down. I know, it's strange.
I know half of what I'm saying here is just wow and oh my God and just reacting because it's just insane, all of it.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I don't know what more I could tell you. I mean, those are the stories that come to mind now. And like I said, when we were sitting in the movie theater, because this was screened at AFM.
That surprises me there was ever a screening for it.
Oh,
even.
God, yeah, it was one of those screenings where like four of us were sitting down front. Me, Anthony DeLongis, the stunt coordinator John Cade, maybe a couple others, Dante, and he's like, and we're sitting there in just in absolute horror, in shock, and it then went to anger, and just like all of these emotions, just open slack-jawed watching this thing. What is this thing? And then it just started to get funny, and we just started laughing. By the end, it was hysterical. But we turned around, and I remember there was what was a full theater was empty by the time this thing was done. So it was hysterical to us, but just to everyone else, it was like, well, why? No, we've got better things to do. No.
What was your reaction to that ending? The triple zoom in?
I loved it. I mean, if this movie was good for anything, it was for your review, which was absolutely hysterical. Someone who could actually put into words, because we were in shock. We were in such shock that we couldn't actually voice things like, what the fuck was the ending? What was that thing? Was it triple zoom push in? What was that? How did they think that they were going to end this like this? What is going on?
Well, how do you react to that? That's just bizarre.
The best part of your review is that you're laughing hysterically for 2 minutes and can't get out a word, and you kept rolling on that, and that you put that in the review, and I was absolutely in tears watching that. Got so much delight from how atrocious this thing was, and was able to put it into words, into tears, into laughter. I'm just, if this movie was good for anything, it was so that you could make that review.
Well, that's probably the best compliment I've ever gotten. Thank you. That means a lot.
It's absolutely honest. It was never do a review, as good as that. But now that I think of it, yes, it does definitely need to be Mystery Science Theatered.
Oh, for sure. I would love it if they did that.
But something, I don't know if you can improve on it. I don't know if you can really improve on the actual, dialogue and the badness of it.
The first time I watched it, because I just love Dean Stockwell because I'm a huge Quantum Leap fan, so I was just looking for any movies that he was part of, and I found the trailer for this on YouTube, but it was in Italian. But all I saw was this image of Dean Stockwell with this terrible wig and this like KFC bucket chicken hat, and I'm like, I need to see this right now, but I couldn't find it. I was like, finally I found on eBay one from Spain, which was La Gran Batalla.
Too, and it's still on its way.
Yeah. I just took a chance and spent like $40 on it because I'm like, I don't
Oh,
even know
wow.
if there will be English tracks on this, but I need to know. And thank God I did. I didn't know anything about it, and I didn't know that voice was going to be like that, the Dean Stockwell voice.
But
I
that was Dean's voice.
but they
That
they
was
had to have
Dean.
pitched it up though.
No,
Like
no, no. That was
what?
Dean. He was doing
What?
this.
But it sounded all dubbed in though.
No, that was Dean.
What?
That was
That's
all
crazy
Dean.
to me.
That
Oh,
is
what
that
an
was.
odd
And
choice.
remember, now that you know the story, you can imagine that Dean put himself in all of that crap after he flew all the way to Jordan, drove all the way to Petra, which is across a desert for like 3-4 hours, got to Petra, was escorted to a local high school gym where they had set up a tent for him, and then threw this crap ass wig on him, and he's like, "What in the hell?" And they didn't have his cigars to begin with, so he was in a bad mood. So he's like, "What
Uh,
the hell have I done? What have I gotten into?" And the fact that he was able to turn that into any kind of performance, and to take anything seriously is just, it boggles my mind. It's just like he is, for as bad as a performance that was, he is a consummate professional to have come up with anything after all the crap he had to do.
oh yeah, oh yeah. I mean, and the gist I got from it was that it was almost like a kids movie type performance. Like he was just trying to like make some sort of fun hammy character. I think. Like
No,
I
no,
mean, it
no, no.
certainly is a hilariously bad role for him.
I gotta
I
wonder.
know.
I gotta wonder. And here's me just guessing. Is just like, maybe if I make myself really over the top, no one will recognize me.
Well,
If I change my voice significantly and then cover my face with a handkerchief half the time, maybe no one will know it's me, and I can change my name and not, take my name off this damn thing.
well,
And then I
on the
still
on the
make you a
Spanish
cigar.
cover, he wasn't Dean Stockwell. He was Dean Stockwell with one L, so it was clearly a different man.
His evil twin brother, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, good God.
I'm curious how much of the original script was left intact, because it's obvious the stuff that was in Bulgaria was different because it was just piecing together this thing. But was there a lot of stuff that was dropped that just did not happen? You mentioned a dragon scene, things like that.
Yeah, there's all sorts of stuff. There's a whole, we only got like 3/4 of the way through the script, maybe halfway. When they finally pulled the plug, they ran out of money. We had to sneak out of the hotel, and like I said, people had disappeared, so we weren't sure if they were shot or killed or whatever. So we're like, we're getting
Uh-huh.
out of Dodge, and they had paid us all in cash. So we had wads of money that you're supposed to declare going through customs,
Uh-huh.
and and we're just like sticking it in suitcases because we were worried about them going through our suitcases and pulling cash, and and in our wallets, in our shoes, and it's just like so surreal, so bizarrely surreal. I'd have to go back in my journal. This is like 20 years ago, and see the rest, because I'm sure there's stuff that I missed that's even crazier than those stories. These are a few that I happen to remember that are burned in my brain, but there's crazier stuff still, and like there's stuff like there was a girl who was injured on set. One of our set PAs thought it would be fun to ride through Petra in the dark under the moon, and she fell off the horse and
Oh
hit her head.
no. Oh.
And they were going to take her to the local hospital, and the locals were saying, no, 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 don't take her there. Take her
Oh.
back to Oman, which is like 3-4 hours away. Otherwise, she's not going to make it. So
Oh wow.
yeah, so stuff like that did happen, and
Um.
that's where it's no longer fun, and then it becomes
Yeah.
scary.
Definitely.
Yeah,
I thought.
and there's other stories, like I work with Ron Hall, who's the one martial artist, the black martial artist who's in the show.
Oh, he was
Uh,
Ron Hall was in that. I remember him from Vampire Assassin.
that's Ron
I've seen.
Hall.
Yeah, he was in
That's Ron
Sinbad.
Hall, and he's amazing, but he's an actual martial artist, and he was challenging the locals to spar, which isn't a
I didn't
cool
even
thing.
know he was in that. That's amazing.
Yeah. And I called him the narcoleptic warrior because he could actually fall asleep on his feet. In between takes, he would be snoring, standing up.
What?
Yeah, And then I was roommates with him at some point, and he snored so loudly, I was like, I can't do this. Like, I don't care. I'll buy my own room. I don't care. It's just, this is ridiculous. I can't get any sleep.
So he was just going around challenging people to sparring matches.
Oh yeah,
in Jordan.
Yeah, which is not cool, because it's like, dude, you get yourself hurt, or you hurt someone else, then we're in trouble. If you hurt yourself, then we're out of an actor. So yeah.
So he was just bored, and that's why he was doing that.
No, he's a martial artist. He likes doing. People like doing nice stuff.
So he was just
they do
doing...
it. They spar.
Okay. That makes sense.
And he's a cool guy otherwise, but he's just like, well, it's possible that he was bored, and he was, just, we were in this for whatever we could get out of it. For me, it was just like, okay, it's a free trip to Jordan, and and it was, there's going to be a lot of stories that come out of this. At some point in time, I had images of myself, being asked to go to this like Bedouin encampment where there's going to be like a whole, there's going to be dancing girls, and there's just a whole scene under the stars. And at some point in time, Anthony and I were invited to this Bedouin sort of party.
Okay.
And it wasn't exactly the same. It turned out it was in this guy's second floor of his shop. And he had a tent actually inside the second floor of the shop, which was, just four walls. And there was about a dozen guys sitting around a TV. And then they had playing on the TV a belly dancer, an old black and white VHS copy of, this Egyptian belly dancers. And belly dancers in Egypt are apparently, they're not the light belly dancers that you usually see. They're fairly hefty women.
Okay.
And this is, that's what they like.
So they were just watching a TV of belly dancing.
Of belly dancing, yes.
Oh, that sounds like such a disappointment to be like, we're finally invited to one of these. Oh, they're watching TV.
Yeah. It is so surreal, and I've got other stories that I don't know if I could share or not, because you would have to edit them. But yeah,
I'd have to edit them.
Yeah. There's one in particular.
Is it just to protect the people involved, or they're too graphic?
No. It's just it's a little off color, but it's just like it's like I said, it's being in Jordan and being in a different culture. Like I said, the guys had no problems holding hands, and being close to each other. I wasn't sure how close.
Okay.
But we're driving along one day, and like I said, can you edit this stuff out if it's not appropriate?
Honestly, I don't have any restrictions on what I can put in this, but if you're not comfortable sharing it, I will cut it out if you don't want it in there.
Hopefully that you don't have a lot of younger crowd, but we're driving along, and our cab driver points to a guy on the side of the road and says, "See that man there? He's a faggot."
What?
And you just out of the blue, he's just like, "No, see that man right there? He's a faggot." And I'm like, "Well, how? Okay, Habib, how do you know this?" He's like, "Because I fucked him."
I guess he would know then.
And I said, "Well, by the transitive power of what you're suggesting, doesn't that make you?" He's like, "Oh no, I was pitching."
He was what?
I was pitching.
Pitching?
Yes.
Wait, what does that mean? What is pitching?
Well, there's pitchers and there's catchers. Use your imagination.
Oh, okay. I see.
Yes. Okay, well, I can't believe I shared that with your audience. I apologize to the kids in the audience, but this is, these are realities of working in a third world country where you don't know who the people are. And,
yeah.
And you may not be accustomed to their ways.
It's funny how blunt some people are about stuff, too. Like they just say whatever. But
I learned to say a couple of curse words in Hindi, which is interesting, or not Hindi, in Jordanian and Arabic, and I still don't know what they mean. But balamaniaka, makes cabbies laugh every time. It's like, I can't believe you just said that.
And it must have been strange coming from you too, since you were so different looking.
Oh yeah. When they think that I don't know how to speak Arabic, and all of a sudden I bust out with. Afwan, shukran, you learn to say please and thank you, and a couple choice curse words. And yeah, you're treated a little differently after that.
So do you think like you got to film in a lot of different countries and situations because you do more B movies or martial arts type movies or things like that? Do you think like there's more filming in different locations because of that, or?
Well, action films in particular, about that point in time, where there were low budget, and bizarrely enough, it's cheaper to film. These film as opposed to just going down the street in L.A., which would be so much easier. It's cheaper for the production company to go to Bulgaria, of all things. To go on the other side of on the other side of the world and to fly people out.
Yeah, Bulgaria is a popular one.
And what they typically do is they just bring their key actors, and like they'll bring out a stunt coordinator, but they won't bring out the stunt crew. So all of a sudden you're surrounded, and I did a show in India where all of a sudden you're surrounded by stuntmen who can't speak the language, don't know what you're talking about, and you're not used to working with. So that's why you have these crazy ass stories.
Yeah, I mean I don't even know how you even get started with that. Like you trying to do stunts with people that don't speak your language. Because there has to be that trust and safety there, of course.
I have a whole other set of stories. Working on a show in India, we worked in Hyderabad for a month and a half, and that was surreal in and of itself. But and that was back in the late '90s, early 2000s. But and that's the way stuff is still done over there. It's all kind of low tech. And you don't really appreciate what you got until you go to a third world country and realize that this is the way some people live, and this is the society that they're in, and they do stuff low tech. And there's actors that go over there. We were talking about Daniel Bernhardt. He did Bloodsport 2 or something like that in Thailand, and I heard stories of one of the guys who got racked up doing stunts on the film and never came back.
And never came back.
He went to a local hospital, and the guys I had talked to, some of the stunt guys, are like, yeah, I don't think he came back. So they don't know if he made it or not, or if it was the local hospitals, or what happened to him, or just fell out after that. But those are the stories I hear, and it's it's one of the reasons they're trying to keep stunts from films from doing from runaway production. It's not just because it's taking films away from Hollywood; it's taking safety measures away from stunts.
I mean, there's a completely different environment to filming in other countries, and they have less safety standards there.
Oh yeah. And when I did a film in Jordan, we had like I said, we had a dozen stunt guys who were willing to do anything. They were going to jump. They were going to fall on their heads from. I needed some guy to do a 30-foot high fall into a box catcher, and some guy stepped up, volunteered, and said he knew how to do it, and went right to his head from 30 feet. And he survived it. But as he was dragging himself out of these boxes, he was like apologizing. He was like, "I'm sorry, so sorry." And I went to I was just happy he was alive, and I went to pat him on the back and say, "No, it's okay." And he flinched because these guys get beaten if they don't do their job. So I was used to the whole caste system there, because people would just get beaten if they didn't do their jobs.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and that's a completely separate. That's a completely other story. Whole other stories from Jordan.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, way more stories that I can even remember from that show. And the best thing that came out of it, once again, was your review. It's absolutely brilliant.
Well, thank you so much.
And if the show had only had a fraction of the brilliance that review had, it would have been savable. But I suppose there wouldn't be a review unless the film was that bad. So I guess it served some purpose.
I had no idea it would be.
That I feel the whole film was justified because of that review.
Well, I had no idea it would be that hilariously bad. Like I said, I was just looking for to watch a Dean Stockwell movie that might be kind of silly. I had no idea I was in for such a ride.
Yeah.
A movie. Yeah. And it's you're talking before, you were saying how the movie probably would have been better if they hadn't taken itself so seriously. But on the flip side, it's such a a whiplash of a movie because the Bulgaria stuff, the mood
Oh yeah,
changes
yeah. And then
completely
Elvis,
to comedic.
whatever Elvis came on board, and he was just a nut job. From what I could tell. I mean, you're going to have to get Tony's side of that story because I'm sure, from what I saw, I was like, what happened here?
I'd love to talk to him about it because that sounds great.
And Tony, you're gonna have to get more tape because Tony likes to talk, and I'm sure he's got a ton of stories. Yeah, that should be really interesting.
So, I mean, you've been friends with Tony longer than Sinbad, right? Like, you guys were friends
Oh,
before
good God,
that?
yeah. No, I recommended Tony for this job, so I feel somewhat responsible. And he went back for Bulgaria, so I guess he hadn't had enough stories. Um,
So,
and
so,
he likes to travel, and so he went back on board for that.
were you guys just childhood friends, or you met through work?
No.
Or...
I moved to LA in 1987, 89, something like that. And Tony was one of the first people I met. And I was into stunts and swordplay, and so was he. We did a stage show called Ring of Steel together, and we've known each other ever since. So we've done a bunch of projects together, and and I bring him into my show, which I have to plug at some point in time.
The Hunted.
The Hunted.tv, which is a show I developed, like 15 years ago as a web series. So we were one of the first web series online. And I would just, this was designed for, Tony and I were actually teaching a class together, a sword fighting class called Acting Action. And I wanted our students to be able to put their training into action somehow and to have some practical experience. So I came up with this thing, which was a web series, which was very new at the time, and it's been going ever since. And Tony agreed to be in a bunch of episodes too, so he's in like at least a half dozen episodes. And then we 3-4 years ago we realized that we could do a Kickstarter and make a feature film version of the show. So Tony came back on for that, along with Gary Casper, a good friend of mine, and Jim Peary, another good friend of mine that I work with on Ring of Steel, which was my first starring role in LA, a film that I also wrote. So that I directed. This is the Hunted feature film, and we just released it a couple weeks ago on Vimeo VOD, and you can check it out online. It's all at www.thehunted.tv.
And I will put the link in the description for people who want
Awesome.
to check it out.
Okay.
And I watched it recently, and it was really funny. I enjoyed the movie, and I'll definitely do a video on it, let people know about it.
Excellent. It definitely doesn't take itself too seriously. And the show is done for what would have been craft services for a day on Sinbad. The fact that we did that for a fraction of the price of Sinbad is ridiculous to me.
I mean, the difference between, the web series stuff versus the movie, I saw a little bit of the web series. I mean, there was, 15 years difference, but it looks really great in the movie.
Yeah, the web series is all done reality TV. There's absolutely no budget to it. So it's just like whenever a stunt buddy or a friend of mine or an actor friend is like comes up, or even students, come up and they're like, oh, I want to do an episode. You're like, okay, fine. And the idea is that the show is based on user content, kind of like YouTube. So it's like going onto YouTube and like dialing up a random episode, because you're going to find stuff that is absolutely unwatchable. And then you're going to find stuff that is just like, you're going to find these like hidden gems. So there's a couple episodes on The Hunted that are absolutely brilliant. People who are professionals and have stepped up, or people who are just really damn funny, or natural filmmakers who have stepped up. And that's what I do the show for. Is occasionally you will get people like that, and to give everyone a chance to I always wanted to try and be a filmmaker and to do a web series, but they don't want to get into the nitty gritty of having to create a website and shoot a dozen episodes and spend the money and try to get a fan base. This is just for people who are like, I want to test the waters. I want to see what this is like.
That's really cool.
So there's all kinds of different episodes, like I said, and it's hard too, because people will show up, they'll watch one episode, and they're like, oh, that was terrible, and think that that's the entire show. No, it's all over the place. It's all kinds of different episodes.
That sounds like a really cool opportunity for people, and also a cool experiment to kind of see different people's
Yeah.
take on sort of the same idea. From what I understand, the series is just about vampire hunters and things like that.
Yeah, and it's kind of the idea is it's like the old TV show Cops, and
Oh, okay.
you had cops from all over the world who were just like, they were doing their job. They would show up and there would be a domestic dispute or whatever, but there was never a set cast. There was never there was never a set location because they would be anywhere in the country. So this is the same sort of thing. You've got you've got these guys who have been bitten by vampires, who are like misfit slayers. But they're not like Buffy slayers. They're guys like who are like soccer moms and clerks and bank tellers and pizza guys. They're just regular people, and it's all done tongue in cheek. So it's all kind of we definitely don't take ourselves too seriously, because I found out if you want to do a web series and you don't have a budget to it, it helps to make people laugh, and they'll forgive a lot when it comes to budget if it's genuinely funny.
If you're having a good time, people can tell you're having a good time, and
Exactly.
they'll forgive a lot of technical flaws because of that.
Exactly, and we do bring whatever production value we can to the show. So we'll have sword fights, and the people who do know how to do martial arts or sword fights will step up and actually do some stuff. And it's there's like I said, there's some episodes that are just top notch, and there's if you go onto the website, there's a best of the hunted, and it'll give a sample of some of the better episodes.
Oh,
And
cool.
now that we've done the feature, we're probably going to go into a whole new level of we do contests every year, so we'll give out hard cash for like $1,000 for best episode, which inspires people to create. And so we've had people all over the country create their own episodes, and we've actually had some from overseas, from Africa, from Europe, because you can shoot these episodes anywhere. So that's the idea, is that the show sustains itself through people shooting their own content, and no one has done this before, based a show on user content. And I think it's interesting. It has to be the right concept, something that you can easily do, because if you try to do something like a Star Trek web series based on user content, well, then everybody would have to be building an enterprise, and have costumes and then have special effects. This is it's very simply done. You have vampires and you have modern day, there's no costuming, there's no history, period, clothing involved. So pretty much anyone could shoot an episode.
Some of the people that filmed episodes for the series, were they included in? There was a montage in the movie of Slayers doing various.
That is correct. Those are some of our affiliates.
Okay.
So these guys, occasionally the contest winners say they want. We have one, Kendall Wells, who's in Oregon, who's like, I dig this. I want to shoot more episodes, so I made him an official affiliate. So just like there was CSI New York and Cops Atlanta, so I give them their own URL and let them go and give them whatever support I can to filming their own series. And he came up with a couple seasons. There was another guy locally who did a brilliant series called The Hunted Compton. So we have 4 affiliates. One was in LA, Compton. The other one was in Oregon, called The Chronicles of Kindle. There was another one in New York called Expulsion. There was another one in Florida called The Hunted Tampa. So these guys have all created at least 1 or 2 seasons of their own spin-off shows. And that's kind of how it's propagating itself.
That's really cool.
So the feature film has meant to be, I never actually shot a pilot for the show. So we decided early on we were just going to shoot a couple episodes to get our feet wet, but we just kept shooting episodes, and it kind of got out of control. So 10 years later, we still hadn't shot the pilot for the show, so no one knew what the show was about. It was like, okay, we gotta fix that. So that's
the movie was easy to understand, even not being familiar with the series.
Right.
I haven't watched the series, but I understood the movie.
Yeah, and the movie is meant to predate the episodes, which is kind of backwards, but you get the idea, so that if you actually watch any of the episodes, you can understand where everybody's coming from and what the rules are. The basic rules is that we've gotten rid of vampires are like cockroaches. They've developed an immunity to everything. So no longer are they affected by holy water or garlic or sunlight or any of that stuff, or stakes to their heart just pisses them off. The only way they could be killed is with a sword to take their head off. So that's kind of Highlander-esque, and we make fun of that in a couple episodes as well. So we did that originally to justify all the swordplay for all the people I know who do swordplay, and that's kind of, I thought it was kind of a fun twist on the show, on the whole vampire lore.
Yeah, and it opens up opportunities, I would think, for filmmakers that can't necessarily film at night too. You can kind of get around some of those rules that would be holding them back.
Yeah, no, that was definitely one of our considerations. Is like, well, if we had vampires that walk around in the daytime, that would help.
Yeah.
We even have there's an episode called Con Job where I had a couple cameos from Len Wein and Marv Wolfman, who are two, if you know them, classic comic book writers. They were editors of DC and Marvel magazine, and I'm sitting in a panel at Comic-Con with them, actually an autograph booth, and they're debating, and I tell them that we're fighting vampires, and they're debating the merits of that, and they're like, well, you can't get rid of all that vampire lore. What about stakes through the heart? What about garlic? There's a lot of writers who spend a lot of time on that stuff. You can't just get rid of it. So, and these guys are both good friends of mine, and they agreed to do this episode. So that was just like one of the things is like, we could shoot these scenes because it's not a huge deal to get someone to show up for like a couple hours or a day at most. We just shot an episode where it took us 2 days to shoot it, a couple weeks to finish it. This episode called Schooled, and it's easy to do on absolutely no budget because people have downtime. Mm-hmm. So like if Tony's available and he's game, we'll say, hey, is it possible we can get in and shoot a little episode with you, and how long will it take? And so there's people who have stepped up to shoot episodes or to be a part of the show who normally were like, I'm just too busy or whatever. But if you work it right, if you're smart with a budget, unlike Sinbad, then you could actually do some good.
You can do anything with any kind of budget as long as you're smart about it.
Exactly.
Yeah, and as funny as Sinbad was, The Hunted was a better made movie. So. Yeah.
I'm sorry you're probably not going to have as much fun with it because it's just like I can't compete with as tragic as Sinbad was. I really
if only you had an ending where it was a terrible ending for your hero. Triple zoom in.
The triple zoom in. I really regret not putting that in our movie somehow, somewhere.
Is this something? Is Sinbad something that you bring up a lot with Anthony or any of your other friends?
No, it's unspoken. It's like, no.
Because I wonder if, because there's been productions I've been part of that become sort of a running joke with people because it was so bad. Yeah. But I don't know. Since it seems like such a highlight in your career, I just wondered if it,
Oh,
came
God.
up.
Oh, please. And we all did have aspirations for it. Actually, I did. It was just like, okay, at least one of the leads in this thing, and I looked at the script and I'm like, it's stupid. Every single line I say is Sinbad. I am just the keeper of the word Sinbad.
Yeah, it seemed like you were kind of there to prop up Richard Grieco's Sinbad, to kind of make him look like the cool guy, and it seemed like they brought in someone who knew how to do swordplay and fight choreography to kind of make him look better, I guess.
It was in the script. He had this buddy in the script. And it just, I don't know. It was just a horribly, horribly written script. I don't know what they were thinking.
You said that you were going to film at the Dead Sea at one point, so there was seafaring stuff going on at some point in the Sinbad movie.
There was I'm sure somewhere I've got the original script for this thing that would be hilarious. Maybe I just tossed it out or burned it, in a fit of whatever.
I would have loved to read the original script.
They were supposed to build an entire galleon, and there were production meetings about, okay, we got to build stuff like the Great Wall of China, and we've got to build this galleon and how we're going to do it. And then of course this guy Vince would pipe up and said, "Oh, I could do that. I could get that for cheap." Like, you've got people to build a galleon or a Great Wall of China. He's like, oh yeah, yeah, no, the Jordanian army, they'll work for nothing. They might if you actually knew them. you know.
So, well,
I
I
was
think
actually joking with this guy at one point in time. I said, "Hey Vince, I bet you could kill someone with a straw," and he was like, "No, that's a myth."
there was one thing he couldn't do.
With an absolutely straight face. He's like, "No, that's a myth." I was like, "Oh, I'm glad you cleared that up for me. I was joking there, dude." But okay.
In some ways, I gotta thank Vince for creating this
I
Frankenstein masterpiece of a
I
movie.
have no idea what happened to him, and the fact that he might be listening to this and sharpening a kukri knife in the process.
Someone mentioned Sinbad somewhere. I hope they're
Yeah,
talking
no,
about what a good job I did.
exactly. No, I have no idea what happened. I have no idea what happened. But there was someone with some kind of pull on the show, because when we came into Jordan, we got stamped on all our passports, and I still have the royal seal. So
Wow.
we have the Jordanian royal seal stamped in our passports. So the one time we got pulled over for driving or doing something reckless, the cop took one look at our passport and just like saying, "Thank you much. Have a good day. Have a good day." So like,
He knew not to mess around
yeah,
with your
so yeah, so
connections.
we had carte blanche to get away with a lot more than we did. We didn't, I didn't really I didn't really partake in eating out because I was warned not to, and everybody got sick within the second week. Uh,
Uh,
and we were also warned to stay away from the local women because you would have their family standing by to chop off your hands.
oh,
If and that thing apparently is still an issue.
wow.
But that didn't stop Richard Grieco and or Dante from hanging out with the local girls. So
They were getting around, huh?
yeah, yeah,
Well, it was a nice vacation for them, I'm sure.
yeah. Um,
What was it? What was Richard Grieco like to work with? I mean, I know I said in the review I thought maybe he had something to do with the production. I was completely wrong on that. With
Yeah,
him.
Richard had nothing to do with the production really. He was brought in. He was, like I said, Daniel Bernhardt was originally supposed to be Sinbad,
Mhm.
which would be a cool choice, but it would have gone wrong nonetheless.
Yeah.
Uh, and Richard, was like Dean. You could tell he really does respect acting. He really does, even though he screwed around on set, and he was who he was at the time, and kind of a playboy. Um, he was taking the character very seriously. He was taking the swordplay very seriously because he wanted to get it right. But the thing is that these people had no training, and we had only days to get them ready to do any of this stuff. His only training at that point had been Muay Thai, which is a very different style of fighting, uh, not swords.
It's
But
very
he was
different, yes.
willing to spend the time. Tony and I split up because Tony's a sword instructor as well. We split up time between him and the actress who was going to be sword fighting as well, and all the people that we were going to have to train because we did not get the Jordanian army. We actually had a casting at some point in time for all of our fighters, and we got them from the local high school, and
Really?
they were yes, and all the fighter guys were from the local high school, and they were virtually impossible to train. Not just because we had a translator, and but that made things difficult enough. But they just weren't. Uh, they had no coordination skills. They really didn't. For some
Uh,
bizarre reason, they could not take a punch, throw a punch, kick, whatever, or much less do any swordplay. So it was like pulling teeth to do this in the time that we had, which was virtually non-existent.
yeah, I mean, that's got to be really tough. The swordplay and the fighting in the movie, I didn't notice anything really off about it. Like, it didn't seem like it was terribly done or anything. Like, as far as
Well,
Richard Grieco goes or the princess.
it's very coming from someone who does swordplay for a living, which I do.
Mhm.
It's very rudimentary. All of the moves are very very simple, and it's I always believe in uh, try to get the simplest moves looking the best as opposed to the most complicated moves looking terrible. Um,
That probably served the movie really well to just
it,
keep
it
it
was
simple.
it was the best. Yeah, it was the best we could do. And then we didn't see, and you wouldn't actually see locations until the day the final fight scene between, you know, Richard Grieco and Mephisto, or not Mephisto, and
Nimbus.
Tony Nimbus. All right, God,
How could you
Tony's
forget
character
Nimbus?
was at this one. I can't remember the name of it. Tony might, but it is at this old theater.
Those giant steps, the stone steps.
The giant ass steps, which our stunt coordinator John Cade actually doubled Tony to fall down like one at a time. It was the longest stair fall in history because like clunk, clunk, clunk.
Yeah, he had to just keep rolling himself down the stairs. Yeah.
And he was worried because at the bottom of those stairs, it didn't just empty out to the ground. There was a 20-foot drop onto the floor of the theater to stone. Jerash is the name of this place, and it predates time. This theater is as old as the hills. And, you know, here we are shooting in these locations and stuff, and you would think that, you know, these are protected monuments. And they were like, no, hey, this you know, this column is in the way. Oh, we'll just knock it down. Whatever. No, nobody cares, you know.
I mean, the locations were really impressive, and you could tell, you know, when they were in historical locations like that were so ancient. One of the fighters I remember being, one of the extras I remember being impressive with this fight, or at least I noticed could fight, was, it seemed to be the only black guy there in a wig, so I wonder if that was Ron Hall.
That was Ron.
So did you recognize him in the review? I mentioned him in the review.
Yeah, no, it
was him?
There's one guy who kind of knows some martial arts.
Well, you can tell who's a martial artist and who's not, usually.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. And I didn't recognize that it was him. I don't remember seeing him credited either. I probably would have mentioned, because a long time ago I talked about Vampire Assassin, which is truly an amazing movie. But
and I haven't actually seen Vampire Assassin. I probably should, you know, because Ron and I still see each other at AFM occasionally every few years, and
That's
like,
cool.
hey, how's it going with you? How's it going with you? And it's just like, it's, you know, for people who were doing action films in the early 90s, it's just like, you know, where do you go from there? Fortunately, I have a career in visual effects and I do other stuff, but it's amazing to me. You know, you've got guys who are like, whatever happened to, you know, that guy, Jeff Speakman, or whatever happened to that guy, you know, and it's amazing to me that all of these guys and a bunch of actor friends of mine who are brilliant actors, but, you know, they make their living doing, you know, carpentry or, you know, or massage therapy or, you know, whatever they're doing or bouncing. You know, you'd think that these guys are living in the lap of luxury, you know, from their early days as action stars, but it's, you know, it's not the case. You know, they're living life day to day, and you know, the money we made off those films, I made virtually no money off the first starring role I did, Ring of Steel, which was distributed through MCA Universal. It was supposed to get a theatrical release, never did. They made a ton of money, but I didn't. You know, and I starred in, you know, a couple other films, Dragon Fury 2, which also had TJ Storm was in that one, and then, you know, I was a lead in this film, which, you know, paid us next to nothing. You know, so that's kind of where that leads you.
Well, it seems like, you know, in the 80s and 90s there was this huge boom for martial artists and movies that were direct to video, or, you know, like action movies. Just get someone who knows how to fight and would look good on screen, and so there was just a ton of it. And it seemed like, you know, once that sort of fell away, I guess that's what happened, you know, once the popularity died out for that type of movie.
Yeah. Well, you know, nowadays I think public is a lot more demanding. You know, there's a lot more visual effects, so it's just like you've got these amazing movies with tons of the effects, and, you know, I think they demand more in terms of a story, you know, as well. It's not enough to just have action. You have to have a halfway decent story. So there's, you know, indie films have and then the whole distribution system is completely changed within, you know, and it changes within like every couple months, you know, every couple weeks. There's a, you know, video online is, I just released my film, The Hunted on Vimeo, VOD. And then I've got to talk to aggregators if I want to release it on Hulu and Netflix and iTunes. And, you know, that's really where indie films are going now.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of content out there. There's tons of content. So it's, It's now, a buyer's market.
It's hard to compete because it's so easy to get stuff out there. I say easy. It's easy to get a lot of crap out there, but it's not easy to get good stuff out there and get it distributed. And
Yeah,
so there's a lot of competition.
yeah, and there's competition for eyeballs when when you've got so many viewers who are on YouTube just watching cat videos or or skateboarding
Mm.
or whatever. It's hard to compete in that market. Um, so yeah, I actually went to AFM this last year, and every year they say it's like, oh, the markets are dying out, the filmmaking markets are dying out. But I believe that this is, the whole VOD online distribution method is just, yeah, it's just going to kill those markets.
Yeah,
Um,
it's just a different way of distributing things now.
yeah, and it's going to open the door for a lot of indie, people who didn't have the time or money or whatever to be able to be seen. So you're going to find, martial arts, just martial artists and amazing, parkour, gymnastic guys, and people, filmmakers being discovered, out of the blue online.
Hmm.
But yeah, getting eyeballs on your film or on your project is really a challenge
Yeah,
because
you got it.
there's so much content, and that's why when I came up with the idea for The Hunted, the idea was to have a show where people could be part of it, to add user content and that's really the key is your fan base. This is how shows that have been canceled are brought back because they have such a strong fan following.
People have a
But
lot more of a say in what they're watching now versus
yes,
back then, because you have social media and you have ways of getting in contact with people that you didn't have before, and so
yeah,
that opens up these opportunities.
yeah.
I noticed there was an effect in the Hunted feature movie where you jump off of a building
Yes,
and onto the ground, like just this single shot of you jumping off of the roof, smack dab onto the ground, naked,
yes,
and
yes.
that was seamless. By the
Yeah,
way, that
naked high
effect.
fall. Yeah, that was fun. Especially because like I said, I call in favors all the time, especially for this film because the film was shot on virtually nothing. So I had a stunt coordinator come out, John Cade, and I didn't exactly describe what I was going to do. The next thing you know, I'm standing on the edge of this 30-foot rooftop, and I'm wearing my little beige Spanx, which is what I wore for that shot. And he's like, "What the hell is this? What is going on? What is this movie?" But you actually see if you take a look at the closing credits, there's a shot of me actually doing the stunt,
Yeah.
and it just means going into an airbag. And then I'm a visual effects artist. I work on a ton of shows, so my career has gone all over the place. I've acted and starred in films. I've written films and stunt coordinated, and now directing. But I've been doing visual effects all along, and I've worked on a ton of big feature films, X-Men and Spider-Man and Superman, and just recently Star Wars.
Yeah, I saw
Uh,
that's crazy.
so
I'm not
so when
crazy
it
that you're crazy that I'm talking to someone part of that actually.
so when it comes to, well, that's at LA though. It's just like you have tons of opportunities out here,
That's really
and
cool.
yeah. So if I was in the Midwest or if I was in the East Coast, I'd probably be doing like court reenactment videos or something like that because those opportunities just aren't there.
Yeah.
But yeah, when movies are under the gun, I usually get called in at the last second. So I'm a fixer,
Mm.
and a lot of times my name doesn't even appear in the credits because it is past the deadline for credits.
Okay.
But consequently, I get paid lots of money to work crazy ass hours and work on these films. So something like that shot of me going off a rooftop incorporates me doing basic stunt, which is a face off from a 30-foot into a fairly small airbag. That's actually a substandard size airbag. It was a lot smaller than I thought I was going to get. And then just doing a shot on the ground where you just sort of jump and land on the ground, and then just combine the two. And it's one of the easiest shots to do in the show, but I think it's the most effective because it's just damn funny.
Well, I mean, I was wondering how you did that when I saw it in the movie, and then I saw the airbag in the credits. So I was,
Yes.
I mean, that was seamless. It really
And that
was.
was just to show folks that yes, it was an actual stunt. It wasn't just like a CG guy going off of the edge of this building.
Yeah, it looked
Uh,
great.
yeah. So the one thing that I felt bad about on The Hunted, because we were asking all of our, and I've got all sorts of stories about that show too. Is like I've got a whole blog online about the craziness that went on with that, because anytime you shoot something low budget like this, stuff is going to happen, and we had our share of stuff. But what I realized at some point in time, that I had all of these amazing stunt people. Monique Ganderton worked for us, who is Rebecca Romaine's double on X-Men 2 for Mystique, and done a ton of stuff on her own. Is a brilliant actress, so she's one of our leads. And a bunch of stunt people come on board who are fantastic at what they do, but there was no budget on this show to hurt themselves.
Mm.
So I realized at some point in time, I can't ask these guys to go balls out to do the stuff they really want to do. I don't want anyone getting hurt on this show. So we really dialed back a lot of the stunts, except for myself. I didn't care if I hurt myself, which I did on a couple occasions. But for the most part, we toned back the sword fights a lot. We didn't do any wire work. We didn't do a whole lot of high falls. We did one fire burn. That's because my buddy Bonsai stepped up and said, I will do this for you. Just like,
yeah, I remember that scene. Yeah.
So yeah, and so he played our meter maid, and so we got some stuff in, but not as much as I would have liked, and that would have all been taken care of if I had a budget. So we did the best job we could for the price of for like a used car.
Well, I mean, I hope that the movie does really well for you, and if you decide to ever do a sequel or anything like that, it helps you to be able to do the things you want to do with it.
Well, I one of the things, and you have to have a lot of mantras going into a project like this, because it's going to be a lot of hard work.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the mantras I had was, it's not going to be your best film, it's your first film. So I have films before, I have directed, I've acted in films before, and you just have to know that you have to go into it realistically, saying, number one, only a fraction amount of the movies that get made, like lovely Sinbad, are actually going to make any money in this business, or get shown, or anything. So you have to go in there knowing that this is going to be a loss to begin with, unless you have a big star name or something that you pre-sold and know that you're going to make money on. Mm-hmm. So you look at that stuff realistically, and then you just look at what your next project is going to be and what's next down the line, and then just let the cards fall where they may. And that's kind of what I'm doing on this. I'll push it for as much as I can, and I know what it's there for. It's there to promote the series in and of itself, and we'll see what happens with that. But I've got my next project already lined up.
Fantastic.
So I'll just keep working from there.
Awesome. So I know
I'm just flashing back to the what is it, the low budget Kevin Sorbo, the
discount Kevin Sorbo.
Discount Kevin Sorbo.
Come on, you could have been Kevin Sorbo. You could be in God's Not Dead even.
And I would have, and that would have led to, and that would have led to Xena, and actually, what was funny is that Kevin went ahead. He was actually in my acting class at the time.
Oh.
And he was quoted as saying, "I don't care what I get. I'm going to do anything." So he was with an acting coach named Larry Moss, who's a brilliant acting coach. So he went out and did Hercules when I went out and did my own film, which I wrote, Ring of Steel. And Ring of Steel got picked up by MTA Universal and got shot for $2 million. So it's a halfway decent watchable film, and it's got really good sword fights in it.
Nice.
But it didn't get to do a theatrical, even though Joe Don Baker, who is one of the cameos in this show, really wanted it to go theatrical. Mm. And obviously Hercules didn't go theatrical either. But at the time, there was a bundle going out called Action Pack. And I don't know if you remember this. This was a Saturday morning show where they just showed features. There was Tech War. William Shatner did something called Tech War, and then there was various shows. And this is where they were actually looking at Ring of Steel, and they looked at Hercules as being a possible series.
Yeah, I remember Hercules. The movies they did were part of the Action Pack.
Right. And so that's how that started. Action Pack picked up Hercules. They were looking at Ring of Steel, but they couldn't figure out how to make it a series because the whole thing is set in a Ring of Steel.
Okay.
It's not
Okay.
an
Yeah.
adventure series. So that's how Hercules got started. And then Sam Raimi jumped on board, and that's how that became what it is.
Okay.
So it really is the luck of the draw. And years later, I'm auditioning for this silly thing, uh, but yeah, and then of course Hercules led to Xena, and it led and then Kevin did Andromeda after that.
Hmm.
So it led to a whole career for him. But you never know where things are going to go.
It's all luck. It's always
Well,
luck.
it's there's a lot of luck involved, and there's a lot of right place at the right time, and
Yeah,
you have
yeah.
to have the skill set to be there when it does come along. So you could beat yourself up, and everyone in Hollywood has those kind of stories. If you take them aside and ask them, it's like, what was that opportunity that you missed? They're like, oh, I'll tell you, I could have been this, or I could have done that. That stuff happens all the time.
Oh yeah.
And you just can't beat yourself up about it, because in reality, if I was in the Midwest somewhere, I would, like I said, I would probably be doing reenactment videos for court cases
Well,
or
it's
whatever. I was actually in Miami. I grew up in Miami, and I was doing extra work on Miami Vice
nice.
back in the day, and they were casting all the roles from LA, and I was like, this is ridiculous. How am I ever going to get ahead here? So that's why I finally made the choice to move out to LA.
Well, it seems like, the important thing, I mean, it always sucks when it's like, oh yeah, there was these opportunities that were missed and things like that, but the important thing is to do things that make you happy.
Exactly.
And
I mean,
it seems like you're doing a lot of projects that are personal to you, and that you're getting things done that you want to do.
Oh, I am so fortunate. I am so blessed, because I really do enjoy working in everything I do. Is like visual effects is it could be a task sometimes, because you're working long hours.
Yeah.
There's days where you'll work 7-day week. On Star Wars, I was working 7-day weeks, 12-hour days, 12 to 14-hour days for like a month and a half.
Wow.
And that really sucks the life out of you.
Yeah.
I really do love it, and I love the swordplay stuff. I just got to do a lightsaber fight for Disney last week, which I can't talk about.
Really cool.
And what's cool about living in LA is that there's something new every day, and then there's crazy ass shit that comes along, like Sinbad. We're like, yeah, we're gonna fly you to Jordan to do this crazy movie with Dean Stockwell, and it's gonna be a crazy ride. He's like, sure, why not? You're gonna pay me money? All right, let's go for it. Someone will find this funny at some point in time. So everything I do, yeah, it's. I'm very blessed with where I am and what I've kind of lucked into, the stunt world and the visual effects and directing, and I think what it really comes down to, though, is that you have to be proactive in LA. There's so many people who are very bitter, and these are the people who are sitting by their phones waiting for a phone call. Waiting for stuff to happen. If you don't actually make your own work, if you don't create stuff like I did with, our show, The Hunted, it just, or my first film, Ring of Steel, if you don't do that, if you're not proactive and actually create, then you're just going to be sitting waiting by a phone and getting bitter by the day while you haven't been cast in whatever.
Yeah, sometimes you just gotta do your own thing, and you gotta put yourself out there.
Yeah, and that way you have no one to blame but yourself if you're not working.
Mm-hmm.
And if it does work, and if stuff does happen, then you're doing what you love with the people that you love. And when I did my first film, Ring of Steel, I got to hire all my friends. And I was working for a couple $1 million in the budget, and all of a sudden, casting directors are working for me as opposed to throwing my headshot in the trash. So. It gives you a completely different perspective on the game.
And then, when opportunities do come up, it feels like that would be more rewarding too, to feel like, you earned that and you did that and you...
Well, yeah, you also don't want to feel like you are owed. It's like I put in my time. That's the other reason people are so bitter in LA, it's like, that's why, you have waiters who are just like, yeah, whatever, who don't care if you get your extra glass of water. It's like, I've been in this town for 20 years, and I've done acting classes, and I've done headshots and all of this stuff, and I'm owed. It's like, no, you're not owed anything. You're really not. Um, and you have to, like I said, you just have to create your own work, and that actually helps when a project does come along and there's a casting. It gives you a sense of, when you walk into a casting, they can smell the desperation. And they know that if you really want this part, it shows. If you want it more than you enjoy playing the character, if you want it more than there's this kind of FU factor that you have coming into a casting when you know that you don't need them. You then concentrate on the character and concentrate on the work, and you're like, I don't really need this. I have, I'm a visual effects artist, or I've got my own show going on, or I've got, whatever. They see that confidence, and that work actually works to your advantage.
That's a good tip for people.
I always, to add to that, I always get the jobs that I don't want. It's like the jobs that I've just like come in is just like, whatever, I'm gonna blow this off, and it's like, no, we want you for the lead in this. And I'm like, are you serious?
Well, I think just having a really positive attitude helps, because when you initially started commenting on the video about it, and then I went out there and asked you if you wanted to talk a bit about the movie and do an interview, I was nervous about it, because you never know what it's like when you're talking to someone that you don't know. But immediately you're like, hey, talking to Allison. Yeah, that review was really great. And it's like, oh, okay, all right, this is fine. This is good.
Oh, yeah. No,
I feel like that probably helps you a lot, having that good attitude.
Oh, yeah, you can't take things too seriously. That was my best advice when I came to LA, is just don't take it too seriously. And that applies to everything. Mm-hmm. Because it's just so nutso. The whole business is nutso. I did a film called Dragon Fury, which is just terrible too. I mean, it is up there with Sinbad. It's very close. They may not have a triple zoom in, but it's bad. It's really, really horribly, wonderfully bad.
Well, the name sounds great. So
there was a person who came out with a review for it, and I contacted him very much the same way I did you, because it was like they said stuff like, it looks like this was shot in someone's backyard. And I'm like, it was totally shot in someone's backyard. And they were right about a lot of stuff too. It was very much the same thing. And, I was able to fill them in with the details, but there was that moment of, it's like, oh, you're not going to take this personally. All the terrible things I wrote about you. It's like, no, I don't take it personally. It was the movie. And I totally agree with you. I mean, the question is why would I do stuff like this? Why would I do Sinbad? Why does anyone do anything? It's like, because you don't know. You don't know what's going to hit. You don't know if Hercules, the pilot, was a terrible. The script was as bad, if not worse, than Sinbad. It really was.
Well, the movie was not good. The show was good, but the movie was not good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you never know where that stuff is going to go. Mm-hmm. And it's possible that Sinbad had, it had a great budget, had a great cast, had a great, and it was going to these locations, and it had a great crew, so what could possibly go wrong? Well, in movies, any little cog of the machine, and if you have a production coordinator who's bullshitting everybody and telling them that, he can get deals that he can't, that will shut down a show. If you have a star that's being, a problem, and I'm not saying Richard Grieco, but there's been shows where, I've worked on where your star name is just like, I just don't feel like working today, or they got drunk or whatever. Or if the editor, slips up, or if, anywhere along the line can just completely devastate a film.
Yeah.
Usually it's in the script, though. If the script isn't there, then you have nothing to go on. So that's why when we did The Hunted, I made sure, we took a year out to rewrite the script when we knew it needed to be updated for the show. And it's like, I know we're not going to have the budget. I know we're not going to have the time to shoot it, or money or anything. But the one thing I can do is to make sure that we've got a solid story, and that we have, at least that we're not 3/4 away with the show, through with the show, like in Sinbad, we now have to piece this together with some other director and just throw this shit together. That's where things really, really go wrong. When you have a crap script to begin with, and then shit goes wrong in the production. Because any of that stuff could just completely destroy your show.
As long as you have a really great story, you can have a terrible budget and you will still have a good movie, because if you don't have the story, you don't have anything there.
Yes.
And I think a lot something that people forget a lot when they're not involved in the process. They just watch movies or shows or whatever. I think they forget that, like, a lot of great actors are in terrible productions. Like, the production does not define the actor, because a lot of the time you don't have a choice unless you're like a super A-list star. You're not going to have a choice and be like, I'm only in this movie or this kind of good movie, I won't do anything else, I won't lower myself to that or whatever.
Right.
You just take what you have and you try to just do the best job that you can with what you're given.
My classic example is Ryan Reynolds in Blade Trinity. Oh my God. If you've seen this movie, what a terrible, terrible film, just unwatchable. But Ryan Reynolds and Parker Posey, when he's in this jail room being tortured, and they start flinging out dialogue, which they came up with. You know, they're just like, screw this script. We're just going to have a blast with this. You know, just absolutely brilliant dialogue, absolutely brilliant scene. Classic. For a terrible, terrible film, they're like, we don't care. And then, for him, that has such talent, I think, to be, sidelined. And I never even did see Green Lantern. I heard it was just atrocious. And, there's a couple films that he just did not get to be who he could be.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, to be cut loose and just like say, go nuts on Deadpool. And to see him just like saying, finally have a venue where he can do what he does. And to see that pay off big time for him.
Yeah. And you can tell, like, when there's something to be said for actors who have sort of, it's kind of a thankless job sometimes, because sometimes they're just really crap roles that you put all of yourself into. And there's something great about actors that they're in a terrible movie, but they put their all into the performance. And that, I think, pays off for them in the end.
Yeah, I worked with Carl Urban on a project, and Carl has done everything Lord of the Rings, and now he's McCoy on Star Trek. Done a ton of stuff, but he had done an episode of Xena before. I actually worked with him on a pilot for a failed fan film called Privateers, and I basically coached him the sword fighting, and I was a leading role in this thing as well. But this was just to talk about a train wreck. This fan film that they had put together, Privateers, had been going for years, and it was a husband and wife team that wanted to put this thing together, and just did so much of this was wrong, was just absolutely wrong. I mean, Carl Urban showed up. Somehow they got Carl Urban and Walter Koenig to sign on this thing, because they had a halfway decent director that they secured. David Duncan is a great guy, and somehow they got this ball rolling. So Carl Urban comes on board, and it's a terrible production. They show up, and they're asking him for his autograph. He has no dressing room. He has nothing. He has a chair in the corner of the room, and Star does not show up on set, and then the producer, director, husband and wife team asks him for his autograph. And it was just a train wreck of a show. But he was a consummate professional the entire time. He was like, he had his lines down. I was blown away that they give him this whole page of technobabble where he had to memorize some combination lock. And it was half a page of like, that's 182297 parsecs with a 2x2. It's jibber jabber. You could have completely made up, but he memorized the entire thing and made sure to get it exactly right.
Wow.
He focused on the sword play. There was this whole concept of sword fights, pirates in space, and so he really dedicated himself to learning the sword play. Didn't say a bad thing about the production the entire time, and just threw himself into it. And I'm sure he knew what was going on, but it was just like, I'm a professional, and this is, I'm in this gig. This is what I got to do.
Well, it seemed like he's been working in Hollywood for a long time before it finally, I think, paid off for him to really make it big. Because I've seen him in Xena and a bunch of other stuff from
Well, that was the only
thing
he had been in. That was the only thing he had actually been in. He was, I guess, what was he? He was Caesar and Xena or something like that?
He was like 4 different characters on Xena, but
Okay.
Caesar was one of them, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, he came into that show, everybody said, oh, he knows sword fighting, don't worry about it. And no, he didn't. He really knows sword fighting, but we worked on that. But he was willing to learn and just a consummate professional. It's, you just never know. You try as an actor to pick the right projects.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's no reason. There would be no reason to think Sinbad would be that bad because they did have a budget and names attached to it. So I wouldn't.
Yeah.
Think...
Yeah. The only thing that was suspect is, like I said, the very first day, and to bring this whole thing full circle, the very first day, for me to come in and meet the production coordinator who wanted to take me out back and find out if I knew enough sword skills to actually kill someone. That is a red flag just to start with. This is the guy who's going to be responsible for the entire production of this film.
Yeah.
So I know he's nuts to begin with. And then to know the director, Alan Mares, who I can't remember how I've known him from something else, but I already knew that he wasn't the director who was going to be, I was not surprised when he took off on one of the last days of shooting to just go buy souvenirs for his wife.
Okay.
Let me just say that. He's a good man, but he is, I think he knew where the production was headed, and he was just like, well, okay, this is, I chalk this up to being a vacation, and I'm gonna get some souvenirs before you guys got this right. Oh yeah, we'll just film the entire end of the movie here in Jerash. You go have a good time. So I don't quite forgive him for that, and if he hears this, that's what we were saying on set, Alan.
Well, it seems like there is that, but when you get involved with productions like that, oftentimes I'll hear at least it was a nice trip. At least it was there's stories to tell, and it was an experience that you're gonna keep with you for the rest of your life. Even if it's a bad production.
Yeah,
it's sort of a bonding experience with the people that you're with.
Oh, definitely. That show that I did, Privateers, we get together every couple of years just to talk about it, just to say how incredibly crazy that was, and especially and thanks to your review, yeah, it looks like we're going to get together and hash this one out. I haven't seen John Cade, the stunt coordinator, for years. He was actually one of the original stunt coordinators for Dukes of Hazzard, so he's got a lot of stories, crazy-ass stories, too.
Wow.
And sometimes that's what you do these shows for. You do the shows for just, the stories that are going to be told, and you just don't want to miss out. And hopefully you're still making enough money to make it worth your while. Mm-hmm. But, yeah, your buddies are going to Jordan, and they're going to be involved in this production, and that they're going to be talking about it for years to come. Mm-hmm. And you hope you could be a part of that at least.
So I guess that being said, if you could go back in time to when Sinbad was being made, knowing what you know now, would you do it again?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
If I was around about the same time, yeah, I totally would do it again.
No hesitation, just would do it again in a heartbeat.
Yeah, no, because it wasn't. This show wasn't about the movie. Mm. It really wasn't. It was about that experience. And there's something to be said for, I just came back from Jordan doing this film with Richard Grieco, and I got to meet Mickey Rooney and and ride through. I mean, there's stuff that, because you're on a film, I think the only show that had been shot previously to this was Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and before that was everybody, all the locals kept calling me Larry, and it was because of, and I'm trying to think of the film, classic film, in the desert.
Lawrence of Arabia?
Thank you, Lawrence of Arabia. The locals kept calling me Larry because I look like, I look like the actor.
So those were the only previous ones that were filmed there? Is that what you're saying? So they hadn't done a lot of filming in that location.
We were treated as kings, and unfortunately we ruined it for everyone else because it was such a fucked up production. But to come on. If I was a tourist visiting Petra, they would let me maybe walk through the Sikh, and and you know it, we were given such opportunity. I'm given an Arabian horse to ride through the Sikh, which you can't do as a tourist. And locals are racing me, on this horse, and I'm riding through the Sikh, this hidden passageway through these huge, 200-foot walls to this stone city on horseback at midnight under moonlight with sparks, coming off the hooves. It's like that stuff you can't even pay for. They wouldn't let you
Wow.
do that. Just the fact that I happened to be working on a movie allowed us to do these things. And it's seeing the world on someone else's dime, and and to get the Royal Jordanian seal stamped in our booklet, that's something that you can't pay for,
It
and
just
to get
sounds
to
like
meet
a
princes.
great experience for a lifetime, honestly.
Oh yeah, no, and to get to meet princes, we met Prince Abdullah. We were expecting
Uh,
some guy in robes and stuff, and here's a guy who's his mom was a Westerner, a very lovely lady, and he was educated in the U.S. So he just hi, how are you doing? And he had the three-piece suit on, and he's like, this is Prince Abdullah, now king. So I've met this guy.
wow.
Where do you get experiences like that? So this really wasn't about the movie.
Oh yeah.
If the movie worked, awesome, that was a bonus. But here you are, you're getting paid to go on vacation, essentially, and to play. I mean, I get to sword fight and act, and and it got a little dicey, but that was part of the adventure.
hmm
So
It's
yeah.
it's like having an adventure like Sinbad, like having a real
Oh,
like a modern adventure.
and on every film I'm on, everybody says eventually at some point in time is like, this would make a great. The story behind the scenes is way better than anything that's going in this movie than the movie itself. And
Uh,
that's absolutely true. You get to see, if you see a film like uh, Finding Finding Quixote or whatever, that Lost in La Mancha,
yeah.
where Terry Gilliam is trying to do his epic film Man of La Mancha, and you see the chaos that happens, and a typhoon hit, and all of their camera gear go floating out the window.
Uh,
You know the crazy shit that happens is way more interesting a lot of times than the actual product.
But that happens with a lot of these movies, and that's why I'm so glad to be able to talk with you and hear these stories, because I knew there was something to this movie. Like, I knew there was
Now
some
you know that.
things that happened. I did not know it would be this vast of a story behind it.
Oh, and
But
this is just the tip of the iceberg. This is just my experience. I mean, I
yeah,
don't know what went on the scenes, behind the scenes, from the people who had to hide out at the U.S. Embassy. I mean, the story's there. I never really
yeah.
talked to them about that. I never really found out what the deal was with Vince and the King. I never, there's so many other things, and I'm sure you're gonna have to set aside a day to talk to Tony, because he went to
I'd love
Bulgaria
to.
and had to deal with that. He also somehow got himself an invite to the prince's private stables and a dinner party, which I didn't attend. So he was doing a lot more schmoozing than I did, and he probably has a lot different insights. We share a lot of the same stories, but yeah, he I'm sure will regale you with some stories that I don't even know.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to talk to him. I'd love to.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a shame that the movie seemed to have gotten buried, considering it started out as like a
Oh, thank
theatrical.
God it got buried. Are you kidding?
Well, I mean,
You
just
you are
now as
you
like
are a
a
rare
cult
breed.
movie.
You are a rare breed that would appreciate a film like this. How exquisitely bad it is.
Well, it's
Uh,
definitely for a bad movie connoisseur. It is not a good movie, and it's not necessarily coherent all of the time.
yeah,
But
but now
it's one of those
hopefully,
movies that's great for people who love stories behind movies.
yeah, and now I hope you have a feeling for every bad movie that's out there. It's just the tip of the iceberg of what actually went on. You know, the craziness, the crap, the insanity, the stories that you could not make up is behind pretty much every movie out there, and especially the bad ones.
Yeah.
because something went wrong, and I love that you knew that.
Well, you gotta, I mean, you gotta know that with every bad movie, well, every movie, there's always something that's going on behind the scenes, and like, there's so many hardworking people that work on these things. From the big budget movies to the indie movies, I mean, there's so much work that goes into things that sometimes just turn out hilariously wrong.
Yeah, and like I said, it could be any step of the way. It could be any step of the way, any department, it could be just one actor, it could be a director, it could be an executive producer, it could be, the executive producer's wife who steps in and wants to, it could be any any little cog of the machine can shut things down completely
Yeah.
and just completely ruin a film. And everybody's hard work just goes right out the window. It's really frustrating to me, especially as a visual effects artist, because when we work on films, there's a level of detail that literally we're looking at every pixel of a film. And the work that goes into creating like CG monsters and the texture and the fabric and the movement and the digitization and everything that goes into that. We rarely, when I work on films, we really get to see the film. We're just working on scenes. So when we go in to see the movie, and if we worked on something like I worked on Riddick, which was another terrible movie, in my opinion. But there's so much CG involved in this thing, and we just sat there with our mouths open. It's like, really, this is what we sacrificed all of those long nights. And, this is why I broke up with my girlfriend, wife, haven't seen my child in 3 months, 6 months, or whatever the case may be. It's just absolutely devastating.
Well, everyone works on pieces of things. I mean, unless you're talking about, like, the Room situation with Tommy Wiseau doing every single thing on there, like, there's always pieces. And I feel like every movie is luck of the draw, whether it's going to be really good or really bad. Even the best movies out there, just by pure luck, became these great movies because all these elements came together, and unfortunately it can go wrong very easily.
Yeah, and like I said, any step of the way, and usually it's the script, and it's so frustrating to me too as a stuntman, because you've got, once again, you'll be brought in to work on a scene, and here it's not just long hours as a visual effects artist, but now someone's asking you to literally risk your life for a shot. And there's some that I have, been in that position where it's like, things could go very wrong here. And if they go wrong, I will be dead. So people are risking their lives and they're getting injured, for a film they know nothing about. And you're making a paycheck. Yeah. But, you're hoping at the end of the day that this is going to be something. This is going to be amount to more than just a paycheck, because you can make a paycheck just bagging groceries or whatever. So here you are jumping off a building, setting yourself on fire, or whatever the case may be. And when you see it in a movie theater, you're like, why didn't some asshole spend 5 more minutes on the script to make this a good movie? How did this go so wrong? Really, is this what I risked my life for? Or is this what I spent all of those nights for? And a lot of times, like I said, it's a script. Someone needed to spend 1 more week with the script or whatever it was to fix the plot holes, to fix the stupidity. And it's easy enough to share that script with a bunch of writers and say, here, look at this. What's wrong with this script?
Well, it's the foundation of the whole thing and the easiest thing to fix.
And I feel this is one of the problems that happened with Lucas and Star Wars. I've actually talked to people who worked with him on the early days, and they said early on, Lucas was very generous with the scripts, and he'd hand them to everybody and say, look, see, here are the scripts. This is, what do you guys think? But slowly over time, that became more and more of like an echo chamber, that he kept things closer and closer to his vest, to the point of, not asking for outside opinion. So this is why the scripts, you're looking at the prequels going, what happened? And it's not because of the visual effects, and it's not because of the acting. You've got Liam Neeson, for God's sake, and all these classical actors. What happened? And it was because you've got one person who's in charge of scripts who doesn't necessarily, is like, well, okay, this is what we're going to do with this. and they're in charge, and they don't really, you know, either they're not listening to other people who are giving them input or advice or whatever. So I think that's my frustration in the
Yeah.
business, is that people don't spend more time making sure they have a solid script before they go into. Some people don't even have a script.
Yeah.
I've been on shows where some lady walks around with a blank pad of paper and say, "What are you going to say in the scene?" I swear to God.
Ugh.
We did that for Dragon Fury 2, because we did a sequel to Dragon Fury, believe it or not, and they had the PA write a script. So I didn't know this until the day of filming. Is like, okay, what is this, and who wrote this, and they just handed it to some kid to write the script, to crank out, 90 pages,
Mhm.
and it was atrocious. We threw it away on day one, and we're like, okay, we're going to make this up as we go along, and it looks like it too. I mean, we didn't take ourselves too seriously. It was myself and Brian Stoller and a bunch of fight guys got together, and we pieced something together, which was action comedy, which we just had a fun time doing. But it's virtually unwatchable.
I've seen movies like that. There was a movie that Ron Hall was in, which is another
Yes.
legendarily bad movie called Pocket Ninjas, which which is a terrible movie shot with parts of it without a script, directed by partially by Donald Jackson, who is known for his Zen filmmaking, which is exactly that. You do not have a script. You just come up with
Wow.
thoughts of scenes, and then you do them. But anyway, this is
Wow,
stuff that I've had to encounter here. But
I need to see this.
Pocket Ninjas is great. It's got Robert Zadar in it. So good.
Oh, Bobby Zadar. Oh my God, of course.
But it's interesting. You bring up Star Wars. That was exactly what I was thinking of as an example of a good movie that was completely by accident. Because it's basically the perfect example, because it's one of the most, if not the most famous movie that people know, and one of the most liked movies, Star Wars. But the original script was terrible. If you read the original scripts, they were awful, and all of these things came together with these people fixing it or changing things to make it so great. And then when you get to the prequels, where if you just surround yourself by yes men, you're not going to get honest answers, and you're not going to get an honest product out of it.
Yes. Yeah, so I suspect it was a combination of yes men, and it's also, his attitude. There's a classic story on Empire Strikes Back where Harrison Ford, when he's getting ready to be frozen in carbonite, does the classic line, I love you, I know. Mm-hmm. And Lucas was dead set against that line. He was like, no, that's not, that's not it. Even though the entire cast and crew, everyone was saying, leave it, it's perfect. But he was adamant about it, and he lost that battle. But, that's kind of an example of where things were going. He wanted things the way he wanted them, and he wasn't listening to other people who were smart, intelligent, creative people who knew what they were talking about.
Yeah. Well, whenever you're involved with a production, there is no one person that can do everything. And oftentimes it goes wrong because someone doesn't want to listen to people who were hired on specifically for those things that they're good at, that they're not, and there's nothing to be ashamed of. It's a group project. It's teamwork. It's not just one person.
Yeah. Although, unfortunately, I was one person on The Hunted.
Well, sometimes you have to when you're working on
like
indie
when you
projects.
have no budget, and you're like, okay, I'm the visual effects artist who's also directing, who's also starring in this thing, and oh God, sleep deprivation, and the stories behind that show. And like I've got a whole blog on this, and at some point in time, I think we hired the Mafia to take care of a problem with SAG.
What?
So there's some really interesting stories about how movies get done in Hollywood. And you just have to get, even though like chaos is, the whole building's falling around you, you just got to keep moving forward, because you've got an 18-day shoot or whatever it is, and if you pull the plug at some point in time, it's going to be impossible to get it going again. It's just going to fall apart. So I'm amazed we got anything out of The Hunted as it was, because of the amazing obstacles that the universe conspired against us in such a huge way to make sure this film didn't get, I don't know, it was absolutely cursed from day one. And the
you
things
said
that
this
happened.
was the first film that you've directed?
This is the first film I've directed. Yes, and
Yeah,
I've directed a lot of shorts before, but yeah, this is the first feature length film, and it was like, and putting this together was like more than once I looked up to the heavens and say, really, really.
Well, you know, like for a first feature film, I mean, it. I've seen a lot of people's first feature films, and it doesn't look like that. You know, like that's you did
Right.
a great
Well,
job with that.
one of the things I've worked up to, like I said, I've done my share of second unit directing, and it's
Mm,
very much LA is very much an apprentice town.
mm,
So it's not like you can go to school, you can go to USC, for filmmaking, and you can you can go to various film schools. But really, what happens is, in terms of like especially stunts, you find a stunt coordinator, you work with them, you're a stunt grunt, and then you eventually become a second unit director, or a stunt coordinator, and then you become a second unit director, and hopefully make your way to director
mm,
at that point. So I've done the jobs of a lot of different people,
mm.
and this was supposed to be a learning experience for me, to like wear all of these hats and to not only have a hand in the stunts, but to to be able to act and direct and to write, and to um, even though I wasn't the head writer on this, I had a buddy of mine, Tex Wall, write the script. I was in on all the production meetings and rewrites and all of that stuff. So this is a lot of what a showrunner does, which is if you watch any TV show, Breaking Bad or anything else, they have a showrunner that does everything.
Mm.
They're involved. They may not be acting, but they're involved in every single part of the process,
Yeah.
from writing, from creating the show, to helping to produce, to being on set, to helping direct, to second unit directing, to hiring the actors, to editorial, to everything. So I wanted to be able to have a hand in all of that stuff. I knew it was a big task, but I had time on my hands to be able to do that, and this was all done at a home studio. So and it would have been done. I would have been finished in like 6 to 8 months had it not been for this is a hobby. No one's paying
Mm.
me to do this, so I'm working at the same time. So I'll take a job. I was working on Once Upon a Time, the TV show, doing effects for that for off and on for 3 years while I was working on this project.
Wow. So when did you start filming the movie?
We shot the film in 2012.
Oh wow.
So yeah,
So yeah, it did take quite a bit to get it done.
yeah. So this was just finished last year, so it took about 3 years. And some films take, indie films. You hear about directorial pet projects that will take 10, 20 years because you're doing them in between when life happens.
Yeah.
So so you have to put it on the back burner, and then it takes time to get going again, and then to do pickup shoots and that kind of stuff.
Mm.
So I feel like 3 years was about right. Although if I had been paid to do it, if I had the money to do it, I probably could have finished it in 6 to 8 months, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think it shows that you've had experience with a lot of different things,
Mhm.
and worn a lot of different hats to be able to
Yeah.
do that, because you don't have a lot of choice when you are working on an indie project, that sometimes you just have to do everything.
Yeah.
But it helps when you have experience with it as well.
Yeah, and it would have helped a lot to have money to make problems go away, because there
Yeah.
were things I had to deal with. It was just like we would lose the location. There was a whole rooftop fight that was supposed to take place on an actual helipad, which we had booked. And at the last day, they were like, yeah, we don't have a security guard, available right now, so we can't let you guys up there. It was like, oh, you've got to be kidding me. So we had to shoot that entire thing in a green screen studio, which, was a 5-minute sequence. And one of the actresses is wearing green. So, and I have a cast of 10. So it was just like, it was stuff like that where I could have paid if I had $100 to hand to a security guard and say, here, could you, hang out for the rest of the day, that problem would have gone away. That would have saved me 3 months right there. So money doesn't, buy everything, but it could have definitely made a lot of problems go away on this film.
It definitely helps.
But it forces you to be creative, and that was part of the process.
Definitely.
Yeah. And I hope that, doing projects like Sinbad, where you have to deal with like crazy obstacles, that prepares you in some way for those moments where weird shit happens, and you're like, well, at least I'm not fighting on the edge of a cliff in Jordan, without any ambulance standing by.
Yeah, it feels like it would give you some perspective after all of that.
It definitely does. And to be in a third world country where where like women aren't necessarily respected, and and they're throwing chickens over the side of the cliff, and kind of stuff like that, definitely puts filmmaking and life into perspective. Just being in this country, where we take so much for granted.
It seems like there's a lot of life lessons to be learned from Sinbad.
Yes. Hey, as you can tell, I'm trying to wrap it up now because I actually got an appointment.
Oh yeah. I'm sorry. Thank you so much for taking all of this time.
This has been absolutely fantastic, Allison. Thank you so much for it's a wonderful conversation, and bringing up the stories, and making this film worthwhile in some small way.
You've been too kind to me. I really appreciate that, and I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me about this.
Absolutely honest. It is the most fun I've had on this film, actually.
That's wonderful to hear. I'm glad that I've helped people out with this.
Yes.
Helped heal some of the wounds from Sinbad.
Yeah. It's been fantastic meeting you and talking with you and sharing some of this stuff with you.
Same to you. Thank you so much. I'll be seeing everyone else soon, and thank you again.
All right, thank you.